Amber Alert, abducted child, African-American girl, 6 years old. Suspect wearing blue shirt, black jeans.
Now when an Amber Alert is issued, you can get the same information the authorities get right on your cell phone. Sign up for free at wirelessamberAlerts.org. Think of it, something as simple as a free text message could free an abducted child.
All units Amber Alert canceled. Child recovered safely. Suspect is in custody.
wirelessamberAlerts.org. A child is calling for help. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
WKPW, Kings Park West, Washington, D.C.
The following is a presentation of unidentified entertainment and 22nd century radio. Manassas, Fairfax, Washington, D.C.
Where is your honor, dirtbag? You are an absolute disgrace!
Him, that can't be William Wallace. I'm prettier than this man. All right, Father. I'll ask him. If I risk my neck for you, will I get a chance to kill Englishmen?
Is your father a ghost? Or do you converse with the Almighty?
In order to find his equal, an Irishman is forced to talk to God. Yes, Father. The Almighty says, don't change the subject, just answer the fucking question.
Mind your tongue.
Seeing Irish. Smart enough to get a dagger past your guards, old man.
That's my friend, Irishman. And the answer to your question is yes. You fight for me, you get to kill the English.
Excellent! Stephen is my name. I'm the most wanted man on my island. Except I'm not on my island, of course. More's the pity.
Your island? You mean Ireland?
Yeah, it's mine.
You're a madman.
I come to the right place now.
What is the soup du jour?
It's the soup of the day.
That sounds good. I'll have that.
You mind if I have some of your tasty beverage to wash?
Give me a Coke. One Coke. Hey, wait a minute. That's only 50 cents.
Yeah, Lou raised the price of Coke. He's been losing it to track.
Well, I ain't paying no 50 cents for no Coke.
You ain't getting no Coke. I'm talking about.
This is a tasty burger.
I want a hamburger, no cheese. I want a hot dog. I want a milkshake. I want potato
You'll
chips.
get nothing you like it.
How about a nice, greasy pork sandwich served in a dirty ashtray?
Hey, Dom, can you scare up another round for our table over here and tell the cook this is low-grade dog food, all right? And here, take this for yourself, okay? Shit, I had better food at the ball game, you know? I tell you, this steak still has marks where the jockey was hitting it.
Okay, this guy needs coffee and crullers. Stat!
Now, back to time and space with your host, Mike Smith.
We were trying to play a game called What is Today's Date? Which I tried to explain to Howard earlier on the memos that I've been printing out. We have the regular, what I'll call the regular date of 20 September 2009.
It's apparently Muslim calendar, if I'm reading this correctly.
That's correct.
1 Shamwow 1430. Did I read that right?
I'm just going to let that run.
Did I read that incorrectly? Did I read that right?
You know, I don't know why that's still funny now, but you said that a while ago, and I laughed, and now I'm just going to go ahead and laugh again, because yes, on the Muslim calendar, it's 1 Shamwow 1430.
Did you know that July was National Hot Dog Month?
I did not know that.
Keep on tuning in.
I thought it was just a
Time and
Coney
Space
Island
with
thing.
your host, Mike Smith.
Thank you.
You learn something new every day.
I was looking at the wrong calendar.
I believe that is on the Mayan calendar.
Is it?
But it's on the next edition that's coming out after December 12th, 2012.
Okay.
All right, hot dogs are a delicious dish. It's made from pig snouts and unused meat scraps. Actually, contrary to popular belief, hot dogs are not made from leftover meat. Lying around. Excellent meats are chosen. Excellent meats are chosen, and looks like they're made with cereal filler, fat.
What does? I'm sorry. Stop. What is that? What is
cereal filler? Well, a filler. Yeah. Right, a filler. Right, it's
so
like some kind of grain, like literally like a cereal. I imagine they wouldn't use barley, but I would guess they would use some kind of like wheat product or like a puff rice. Or,
okay.
I don't know. It's filler. You know, it's filler. It's like when your wife's talking, you just go yep, yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about.
It's like that. It just fills the space.
I never had that experience.
Would you have preferred banter?
Wow. All right, so filler and meat that's been laying around.
Fat, filler, a little bit of egg white, and a mouth-watering array of different seasonings. All right, anyway, you grind all this up and you jam it into a sausage casing. All right, I've actually made hot dogs before. Not that it's a tough thing. It's basically a sausage. Okay, it's a sausage, and what you do when you make any sausage is you grind up different kinds of meats and whatever flavorings you want.
Right.
You know, crushed red pepper, whatever you like.
Right.
Garlic, nutmeg, whatever. You grind it all up. You jam it into a big bowl, and there's a pusher, and you push the meat through it, and then you add like chunks of fat because you need the fat to give it some flavor. Fat is flavor. And then you jam it into casings, which casings are basically just intestines in a box.
Yes.
And you unfold the casings, you soak them in water to make them pliable,
right?
And you jam this meat into them,
right?
And depending on how long you want the links to be, that's where you turn. You make twists in it.
Yes.
Much like you would make a balloon toy for a kid at a party. All right, same kind of thing. So you twist them up, you do whatever, and then you can cook it in boiling water. You really pretty much have to cook sausage in boiling water.
Right.
If you tried to roast it, the skins would split, much like when you cook them at home. Yeah, you cook them at home. So most hot dogs are already fully cooked that you buy.
Right.
Unlike a traditional like spicy Italian sausage.
Where does the hot dog fall into the spectrum of bratwurst and sausage links and all these various things? Obviously, over in Germany, I had my share of brats, and they were all excellent. We had white brats and spicy. I mean, great food.
I would say that the hot dog is kind of an American catch-all for because there's a lot of different kinds of hot dogs.
Right.
If you've ever been to New England,
yes,
up further in New England, New Hampshire, Maine, they have what they call the red hot dog.
Right.
And it's very heavily dyed, and it's longer and thinner.
Yes.
Excuse me. It's got an excellent flavor to it. When you go further down south, they have the ballparks. They're thicker, they're fatter,
right?
They're juicier. They have a lot more. They have more fat in them. They have different spices. Whereas something a bratwurst is a very specific type of sausage.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're really serious about their sausage over there. It's no different than the French with their wine.
Right.
Is if it's from a certain region, it can be called a certain things. If it's not from a different region, it can be called something else. I would guess that it all depends on what kind of spices you put in it,
right?
And whether it has veal in it or not, because I believe brats have veal and pork.
Oh.
But don't quote me on that.
Right. And of course, Howard can identify the greatest hot dog ever for sale anywhere.
Martinsville
Speedway.
$2.
That's exactly right.
$2 and it's red.
It's red. Get the coleslaw, the chili, get the whole thing there. Doesn't matter how cold or hot it is, as long as Jimmy Johnson's not winning. Get yourself a Martinsville hot dog.
So do they call that a Frankfurter?
No, I think they just call it a dog. Martinsville's famous dog, I believe, is how they list it on the menu.
That might be exactly right. We have to look that up, or throw that out there for a prize.
The average American eats 60 hot dogs a year.
Ooh.
So how many hot dogs a year do you eat?
I guess I'm below average.
I'm way below average.
All right, so if the three of us are below average and we eat, I'm going to say 10.
Okay. I don't know if I eat 10. I mean, really,
I probably go through like 3 dozen, but 60?
All right, so if you figure on average we eat about 8 on average between the three of us.
Sure.
There's some people eating some hot dogs out there.
There are. Should we call Tim and ask him if he's enjoying a fine Oscar Mayer product this evening?
We can ask him if he's pickled.
Well, we may know before he gets to answer.
See if he has a pickled hot dog.
Or a pickled liver.
Looking ahead to future episodes in the script that I have, I just want to touch on this real quick. You're listening to episode 3, the obligatory episode about Stanton Friedman. Coming up in future episodes, episode 4, we have planned to talk about the podcast. I know that there's some of you out there that have listened to this, probably subscribed to it on iTunes. For those of you who have not, you are in luck. I don't know how to say this, but just a couple of weeks ago, despite the fact that I had been writing this thing for weeks and months, Mysterious Universe is a podcast originating from Australia that had absolutely disappeared completely off the internet about 12 months ago. And suddenly, much to my own surprise, I did not think that I would ever hear from this again. Benjamin Grundy has gotten this thing back online. Go to mysteriousnuniverse.org. Check out the episodes that they have. They are very impressive. A lot of great material. We're going to talk about them in episode 4 and hopefully speak to Benjamin Grundy. Episode 5, we're going to talk about X Conference 2010. I went to X Conference 2009 up in Gaithersburg, Maryland. Interviewed Michael Sala, Richard Dolan, Paula Harris, Stephen Bassett, a number of other people. It was a fantastic experience for me, and we are looking forward to X Conference 2010. We'll talk to Stephen Bassett, find out who he's got coming up for that. Episode 6, we're going to talk about the moon. Episode 7, we're going to talk about Jesus. Ever heard of him? Episode 8, we'll touch on the United States presidents again. We'll hopefully speak to Grant Cameron. We had touched on the United States presidents in the episode that we had recorded here a few weeks ago that didn't work out because the audio got corrupted, unfortunately. Episode 9, we'll talk to William Henry about Washington, D.C., some of the secret architecture and other aspects of this beautiful city that we happen to live right next to that are just more interesting than anybody could possibly imagine. We'll also, in future episodes, talk about the alien abduction phenomenon, Nazis, pyramids, NASA, the Dalai Lama, 2012, Jerusalem, and more. It couldn't possibly get more interesting on this show. So, I am happy to move on to talk about our good buddy TK. Would you like to fire up Skype and see if we can't get him on the phone again? We're gonna touch base on this again. If you are familiar sitting around during the Christmas season, which now is upcoming, NORAD, our good buddies on NORAD, actually have something they call the Santa Tracker. TK had apparently bailed on us today for whatever reason, and that's fine. I don't understand why, but you know, he's got stuff he's got to do.
It's ringing.
He's got stuff to do, and we're probably just going to get his voicemail again. But we're going to try to track him down. We're going to follow him like the NORAD Santa Tracker. We're calling it our NORAD TK Tracker. There would actually be like this little magical sled that's going from city to city.
I'm sorry, Mr. Call.
Yeah, he's not there.
I can't.
I'm just going to hang up.
That's great.
At
No,
the tone, please record your message. When
don't
you finish
hang up.
recording, you may
No,
hang up
don't
or
do
press
that.
1 for more options.
No, yes.
To leave a callback number, press 5.
Let's leave a callback number. Because he couldn't possibly. Hello, Tim Kirk. Hello, TK. It's Smith at H-Town. We're watching the race where you just watched the Redskins pull that fantastic upset of the Rams, and we're trying to figure out where you are. I believe this is our second phone call to you today, so please return our call when you have a chance. Good day to you, sir. I said good day. Mr. Kirk is a co-host on this show, possibly in name only, I think. It's entirely possible that you're only going to hear him do bumpers and intros and whatever else, but occasionally he might be live on the microphone. He is running around today with a relative that was in town from London. His family is from Ireland, and they've spent the past couple of weeks entertaining this guest of theirs, and apparently we're taking her back out to the airport or something. So we've been trying to track TK down and talk to him. He is, as we say, currently MIA. If you can follow online, go to NORAD and check out the TK Tracker. It's right there next to the Santa Tracker and just as reliable. And good luck trying to figure out where TK is today.
Apparently he's not in Loudon, New Hampshire, because I do not see him on the transponder for the speed chart.
Exactly. Lovely. That's beautiful. Thanks, buddy. Thanks, buddy, for joining us.
Just backing you up there.
Thanks. I can't possibly put the buddy thing in perspective, but I have a guy that I work with that there's something about the way that he says buddy to other people that just absolutely cracks me up. Hey, thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, thanks, buddy. Yeah. I can't do it. I'm going to have to find a sound clip of him to see if I can't get him to maybe volunteer that for one of our shows. Okay. This is Tim you're calling?
Tim Kirk, right. Take 3.
Yeah. Hold your breath.
Tim Kirk, no, that's not a key.
Alright, if you get voicemail, just hang up and we'll try Faye right away.
Hey, Tim, I'm sorry I missed your call.
See ya. You're listening to Time and Space. I'm your host, Mike Smith. I've been here with H-Town watching some sports, having a good time, doing a couple of news desk stories. We're going to perfect this as we go, but the first time around, I just want to say that I really appreciate your assistance, your help, and your commitment to the idea that we could do this show.
Just to follow back up on one thing, Mark Martin got the win in Loudon, and Denny Hamlin did get second place, Juan Pablo Montoya third, Jimmy Johnson fourth, and Kyle Busch fifth. That's your top 5.
If you're following the chase and your name is Mike Fortin, that's right, you just lost another $5 to Cheesy Mike Smith, who just became a NASCAR fan 3 years ago. That's great. Excellent.
Well,
it's been
good.
fun watching
Now I know
it
where
all
my
day.
paycheck is coming from.
That's right, yes. That's right. You're being compensated for every breath you take. No pun intended. Excellent. Episode 3. You're listening to the obligatory episode about Stanton Friedman on Time and Space. We're very happy to be here and looking forward to completing the multiple hours of this show as we move on.
This is Time and Space, hosted by Mike Smith.
That's me. Back again. We wanted to try to summarize for our listeners here to start to familiarize everybody with a few of the games and bits and zany goofiness that we're going to try to mess around with. We're trying to be creative in the tradition of a Don and Mike and others that kind of made stuff up on the fly and it somehow took and became a game. Some of these might die off. Some of them most likely will not die off. And I put together a short list here for Howard to try to bounce through to see what a couple of the different names are.
We're going to have a fine piece of driving.
Yeah, that's a fine piece of driving. Those who heard episode 3 will probably have already heard the Goat in the Road story. And I'm hoping at various points, I had given a phone number to you guys, so whenever you're out, if you happen to see something.
I've actually called that number and reported Wednesday of this past week of I would say, a Caucasian woman driving a large expedition who happened to have an open Big Mac container with a large Big Mac in her left hand and a cell phone in the right hand, trying to navigate her way through the parking lots of the Washington Hospital Center down in North Capitol of D.C.
Your description would lead us to believe that she must have been driving with her third hand.
I believe she might have been doing so. Yes,
that's good. That's how you play the game. As we develop this a little bit further, we'll certainly invite listeners to call in, possibly even live, to give us descriptions. But we're going to have some pretty strict rules on this game. We don't want people out there messing with each other, and obviously it kind of defeats the purpose if you're out there making yourself into a hazard and causing an accident while you're trying to report another dangerous driver. So let's keep it together and drive safely out there.
On my commute every morning, I see plenty of it on 66 East.
Yeah, right. I've got it.
Yeah, that's just a nightmare right there to start.
I've got it nailed down to a couple of specific spots, especially on my drive home every day from work, that I can predict. One of my favorite things to do. I might call in myself just to do this. This would be fun with Tim too. Put some quick wagers on the cars. There's a series of lanes after you've gone from 95 north and you've merged on this big looping ramp to get on 495 to start heading around towards Tyson's Corner. The right lanes in sequence, I think as many as 3 of them come to an end, and there's just nothing but a long stretch of signs that says lane ends, move over, lane ends, move over. And eventually it just turns...
They're the flyovers.
Yeah, and it turns into an exit lane, and literally just as you're getting to that retaining wall, that commit cone for the pit, there are still people bailing out because they don't realize they're getting run off the highway. Yeah, that's exactly right. So I like to play a little game with myself where I bet, like, I know you haven't figured it out yet, but you're gonna need to get over to the left.
I do it all the time.
Exactly. So,
all right, the next game we have is really for our
yes, we'll check in with him in just a little while.
Our show chef, executive chef, and it's how do you cook that? So, I guess the main point of that is we'll ask Mike how to cook a certain item.
Whatever it might be, yeah. It's just about anything you can come up with if you want to deep fry a cell phone. My son came up with a pretty good one the other day because he's getting so used to seeing the cat bring dead animals back, and he was wondering, if you could take a headless chipmunk and drop that in the deep fryer, maybe throw some carrots and cucumbers in there with it.
My
See what you got.
My cat showed us her love this past 2 weeks ago by bringing a live bird into the house.
Yes.
Ian looked at us and goes, "Oh, look, Misty has something," and she still let her in. 2
words would explain this: fresh poultry. That's all that was going on there. It's just, she doesn't want it to be.
Misty is quite the little hunter outside.
Excellent. Okay.
Then we have what's today's date?
Yes.
And that is one of my personal favorites.
Yes. What's today's date? We haven't gotten to do this with Kirk yet.
Today is November 6th, but it's also 19 Thou Shalt Not Kill 1430.
Wow.
Isn't it?
Yeah. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but yes.
Some of you
here in the United States, if you have Microsoft Office 2007, you'll be interested to know that you can insert a date in memorandums and various other things, and that in these newer versions, this may have started with 2003 actually, they have allowed you to switch date formats so that you can put your time reference that's on your memo or whatever you've written into various calendar formats. And I think that it's just kind of interesting. People talk about how outside the United States, there's a whole other world, and that people here in the United States don't have any idea what we're talking about half the time. And this is a perfect example of it. So we're going to have a game where occasionally we're going to throw this out to the audience. And anybody who wants to call in or email in when we've fired off our question and are offering a prize, if you can give us the correct date on the Muslim calendar, on the Chinese calendar, on the Jewish calendar, and I mean the correct date. What is today's date? We would like to cross-reference that. We will definitely give out prizes to people that can answer those questions correctly.
I still like October because that's sham wow.
Yes. Howard.
You'll say wow every time.
Howard's not going to get past that one. Exactly.
Oktoberfest.
No, it's sham wow. You'll say wow every time.
And I'm sorry, what was the Thou Shalt Not Kill? Is that the current month on the...
Today is 19 Thou Shalt Not Kill.
The Hijri calendar. And some basic differences that are really mind-blowing when you stop and think about it. I won't go off on a big tangent about this at the moment, but, think about it. Our calendar that we use here, people say the Gregorian calendar, all this stuff, is a solar calendar. It's based on the sun. And the calendar that's used by Muslims is a lunar calendar. Their sense of time is completely different from ours. I mean, 24 hours in a day is a pretty standard kind of a thing, but when you start getting into 10 months in the year and, it's just a completely different... set of mathematics, and it's pretty interesting stuff.
Okay, the next game bit is Name All 8, which is a musical reference game where we're going to feature or have 8 songs by a specific artist.
That's correct. We might vary on the number just a little bit because for episode 3,
We used one band, and I actually used 10 songs in that episode. I may even bump it to 11, depending on post-production. But
turn it up to 11?
The idea, because we go all the way to 11. Because the idea is, and this is really a game that's sort of geared towards music buffs, real good music buffs, especially if you're a fan of a particular band that we've chosen for that episode. Howard and I don't know that you saw these emails, Tim, but we were going back and forth a little bit yesterday. One with what will hopefully be our flagship radio station. They chimed in their opinion, and I actually got some information back directly from Sony Music, clarifying the whole royalties thing and how we're going to use music. And it looks like our strategy that we wanted to use for the show is going to be dead on. So the idea is that each episode will highlight one specific band. In most cases, the music chosen from that band will actually have something to do, I'll say generally, with the show. For example, in the case of a Bob Marley, I'm much more interested in his stuff about, the Concrete Jungle and Rat Race and Zion and all this other stuff, as opposed to all the love songs that he wrote. And it's not that I have any problem with the love songs. This just isn't a show where I'm not trying to highlight that kind of stuff. So when you do hear Bob Marley, you're going to probably want to lean towards more of those religious types of songs.
He's a lover, not a fighter.
He is a lover,
or
not
a fighter, not a lover. Excuse me, because he's not into love songs.
Me? Oh, come on now.
It's a love song.
I've got a soft side.
It's a love song from a slightly different point of view.
So if you're hearing this, even in post-production, and especially if you put together a good argument, put together what you think the list of songs was on the episode and drop us an email, timeandspace@live.com, and let us know what you think that list consists of. The more footnotes, the better. The better your answer, the more likely you're going to get a prize out of us. But that is definitely a standing offer. Name all 8. We'll probably key that up at the end of every single episode and maybe even give you a few hints as to who the band might have been if you hadn't been able to figure that out or whatever. We're definitely going to be all over the spectrum, too. I'm just going to say I was going to do a guest call tonight with our good friend DJ Black Caesar from down in D.C., and he was going to join us and is going to join us on some future episodes, and he's got a whole set of tunes that aren't in the mix that I have. I'm doing, your Pearl Jams and Rolling Stones and Jimmy Buffett's, and he's all the way over on the other side of the equation with Bob Marley and Chuck Brown and, all kinds of other stuff. So it's going to be a real great mix. At some point, I guess we're going to have to buckle in and bring some country artists into the mix, but we'll see what we get.
Just to let you know about something, at the 9:30 Club, Public Enemy is coming into town.
Thought I'd heard something about that. We might actually touch on that in another episode, and I'd rather put the kibosh on that until we can talk about it in more detail.
Public Enemy in concert.
Yes, well, there is that, isn't there? That's a pretty interesting thing.
I saw them in North Houston. Several remarkable. I won't bore you with details of the actual concert itself because that was in '91. But
I was going to ask the year, and the other band playing was Anthrax.
Was
is
Anthrax?
That correct?
Yes, it was the Bring the Noise tour.
Yes.
There are several interesting pieces that I just want to touch on real quick. The first was, it was in North Houston. North Houston is a large proportion of Hispanic population there. And exiting I-59, I'm sorry, 59, Interstate 59 in Houston, there was the temple, the Jewish temple, with the Spanish writing on the outside telling you what temple it was.
Wow.
That was great.
That
was the first Spanish temple I had ever seen.
Isn't that
Jewish
interesting?
Spanish temple.
Isn't that interesting?
To this day I remember that. And the second piece of information that I would like to just share with you was that I believe it was a gutted Kroger grocery store
yes.
that the neon from like deli and bakery had
was all
burned
left
into the wall.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
that's where the show was.
That's where the show was.
Yeah.
You walk through
a
metal
burned out
detector.
Kroger.
No, just a gutted
the
Kroger.
shell. Yeah, the
it
shell
wasn't
of
burned.
I'm being.
It was a closed Kroger grocery store.
Right.
But the neon lights that are on the side of the wall of the old grocery stores had burned the image of bakery and deli and all that into the butcher and all that into
That's great.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting place. So that's what we've got there. Then the final game that we have is the I didn't say that setup.
Yes, all right. Now I'm gonna get through this one real quick. I had talked to Howard about this on email, and this one we're gonna gear the initial rendition of this game squarely on Mr. Tim Kirk, and I'll tell you what the basic concept of the game is that we've got you on tape from doing a bunch of takes for all these different episodes as we're trying to get started, and in a few cases you have said stuff that I will only say is downright remarkable, and I would like to present those to you, and then in some cases you might actually be willing to try to place a wager to defend yourself with the statement I didn't say that, and we'll see whether that's what you really said or not, because some of them are just hard to believe.
Well,
and believe me, we can turn the crosshairs on other people, me included. As I was saying, I got a terrible case of the rights.
That's a pretty broad spectrum, though. Is it music related? Is it politically related? I mean,
whatever the remark is almost
fair game.
Is fair game, yeah,
fair game?
Yeah. And we're not trying to key on different stuff. We're looking for the real gems, the verbal miscues. Those of you hearing this may have already heard a couple of episodes of our show, and we'll already be able to identify a couple of those things clearly.
And we'd like to thank you both for listening.
Wow.
I'll be happy to participate. That is not a problem.
Yes, we're going to make you our first target, and then we'll start picking on other people.
Just throw the darts in my back right now.
It wasn't darts; those were swords.
Now, there was one other footnote.
There's one other footnote. Okay, as may have been stated in a previous recording, that you may have heard, I worked at a mall called Pasadena Town Square.
All right. Yes.
Okay, yes. This mall is outside of Houston, Texas.
I'm sorry. I just listened to this again last night as I was walking back from my class, and again I laughed out loud because the story is very well told. You don't need to recant the whole thing here, but let's jump right to the part about the standing offer, because I would offer a prize for that.
Okay, the standing offer is if anybody can bring me a prize, if anybody can submit by email to timeandspace@live.com the picture of the cowboy riding the armadillo. It is a bronze statue that the last time, I can't say, I don't know if even still exists in the malls there,
right.
Let alone the armadillo. And if the mall is gone, it's an even better.
It is possible, because this is probably a treasure of the city of Houston, that this may have been moved to another location. In that case,
like a monument.
We'd love the update. We would love to have the update.
I might have to go on to the Google and do a search on Pasadena Town Square to see if the mall still exists.
That's correct.
But there is a cowboy on a big bronze armadillo that
riding it.
Right. I mean, Houston's a rodeo town. But
I love it.
I've never seen. First of all, I never went to the rodeo when I lived in Houston. But I'm certain they're not riding armadillos.
Oh, my goodness.
So that's the standing offer.
Yeah.
I would love to have a picture of that. And the next time I'm in Houston, I'm going to make it I'm going to make the time to make that drive to see if that mall exists, because it's very easy to get to. It's off of 290 and
so those of you in the Houston, the greater Houston metropolitan area should know what that is. So we're going to frequently do that. We're going to throw out a standing offer for a prize. Just understand that the way that we select prize winners is certainly completely at our discretion, and we're going to do it just about any way that we feel like. So keep an eye out for that. That's a bunch of our games and bits and other junk that we're messing around with. We just thought we'd get it out there. If you've got any suggestions, feel free to email or call us, and let us know what you think. If you've got any ideas for some of the games, we'd be happy to pay attention just to see what kind of ridiculous stuff you come up with.
I've got a game off the top of my head.
Knock yourself out.
My 9-year-old can out-bowl you.
There is that. So, all right, good. Well, let's cut to another break, I guess, here, and we'll move on to whatever the next bit is. You're listening to Time and Space. I'm your host, Mike Smith. Thanks very much to H-Town for working with us this evening, and Tim Kirk and I are going to keep going on a few other things here coming up.
Exopolitics and Ufology, Religion and Science, Time and Space. Hosted by Mike Smith.
You're listening to Time and Space on 22nd Century Radio.
I was wondering if, and I know that you had spoken at least at X Conference 2. I was able to attend the X Conference last year, and I was wondering if you had any comments on this whole disclosure concept, and you know, maybe any plans to return to the X Conference, or just generally what you might think of that.
Well,
issue.
when they've asked me, I've gone, and I had to turn one down because I already had an engagement on that out in Alberta, which is a long way from where they were.
Right.
And I haven't been asked back since then. I don't know whether I was taken the wrong way. Sure. I'm not a big fan of the disclosure projects. I like Steve Bassett. I'm not as fond of Steve Greer. I don't know why Steve's here, but anyway. I think they're being very unrealistic about they don't see any good reasons. I don't want technical data put out on the table.
Right.
Well, I mean, think about it. There's Osama out there. There's a whole bunch of other bad guys out there. You can't tell your friends without telling your enemies.
Right. Exactly what you said earlier. That's right.
Yeah, I mean, that's a basic rule for security. You know that.
Yes.
And so... and also, they haven't vetted their people very carefully. Some of them, and they didn't use government documents when they had their big press conference. Why just have people's testimony? The press doesn't want to run with that. Right. They're not going to check anybody out.
Right.
Use government studies to show the reality of the subject and various documents to show that they're covering up. Can't argue with the documents
right.
if you got them from the government, if there's no question about the legitimacy.
Sure.
I mean, not that people won't argue anyway, but
right.
like MJ-12
right.
or something. But
well, I'm curious to know too. Going back in your many years with us, there had to be. It would seem to me what I'm. Got in my notes here as being a sort of Newton apple on the head, or I could have had a V8 type of a moment. I mean, like everybody, at one point, you were just a little kid running around. I was curious to know when this, sort of clicked in your head and you got interested in this subject.
When I was 24, I was a young nuclear physicist working for General Electric at Aircraft Nuclear Propulsion Department, Evendale, Ohio, just outside Cincinnati. And I was looking at a catalog of books from a discount book place, Marlboro Books in New York. And we needed one more. My wife and I often ordered books. And we needed one more book so we wouldn't have to pay shipping. I'm a cheapskate. And there was the report on unidentified flying objects by Air Force Captain Edward J. Ruppelt, who headed Project Blue Book in the early 50s. This was 1958. And... it was marked down from $2.95 to $1. It was a hardcover book. You believe?
I buy cheap books on Amazon constantly, used and reused.
Yeah.
I mean, why not? I'm paying $2 for a book I would have paid $25 for in the store.
Yeah, I do that too, and I recommended that to somebody yesterday. I gave a talk in New York, and somebody said, "Well, where can I get that?" I said, "Look, go to Amazon. Right. Cheap, real cheap." Anyway, I read the book. I figured my reasoning went like this. Air Force was co-sponsor of our program, so I had good thoughts about the Air Force. Sure. This guy ought to know what he's talking about. He was head of Project Blue Book. If these things use nuclear power, right, if they're real, of course, that would help our program.
Of course.
And finally, be worth a laugh if there's nothing to it. And it wasn't costing me anything.
Right.
The buck was what I would have had to pay for shipping anyway. So I read the book. I was intrigued, not convinced, but intrigued. Shared it with a neighbor. Charlie was an engineer 10 years older than I was. He was more impressed than I was. And I went off to California, had a very good librarian. My specialty was canceled government-sponsored R&D programs. Read about 15 books. And then I stumbled across Project Blue Book Special Report number 14.
Right.
And that was a real shocker for several reasons. One, none of the other books had mentioned it. Where the heck has this thing been hiding? Two, the Secretary of the Air Force was lying through his teeth in the press release.
I've heard you make your case about that before, right?
Yeah, and three, there was an enormous amount of data, including things like a chi-square statistical analysis. Do the unknowns match the knowns? 6 different characteristics. The probability was less than 1% that they did. Wow. And so, and finding the lies by the Secretary of the Air Force, that really shook me up.
I'm sure it did.
So that got me determined, and I joined APRO and NICAP to get their newsletters, and I gave my first radio broadcast because I had talked to Frank Edwards. Well, I lived in Indianapolis, another one of my canceled government contracts. Frank was there, and got to know him a bit. And his book, Flying Saucers, Serious Business, he sent me a copy. This time I'd moved to Pittsburgh to work for Westinghouse on nuclear rockets, and I called Frank, and I said, "Hey, Frank, you know everybody. I want to go public. You know somebody around here?" And so he gave me a number of names, including the producer for a talk show on KDKA Pittsburgh, one of the big early, 50,000-watt clear channel radio stations.
Right.
Has a huge audience. It's a Westinghouse station, actually. And he gave me the name of the producer of a show with the great name Contact, which I always thought was funny. Anyway, I called them, and it was one of those, "Don't call us, we'll call you." Even though I was Westinghouse nuclear physicist, that was, high qualifications in Pittsburgh. Right. Okay, less than a month later, they called me at 6:30 to be on a show at 7 o'clock. Because somebody had canceled, and I lived near the station.
Right.
So I did it. Would you please be on the show? Somebody at work at Westinghouse heard me, a woman who had a book review club, and the book they were reading was Frank Edwards' book, Flying Saucer Serious Business, and they asked me to give a talk to their club. That was my first lecture in somebody's living room. And I gave a bunch more of the chicken and peas circuit, and it's a funny story, so I'll tell it. The 1 out of 2 times that I drove to work from downtown Pittsburgh out to Astronuclear Lab, which was in a little town called Large, Joanne, she was a PhD from Caltech, and she was working at Westinghouse, supervisor. And we were talking. I said, "Gee, I'd like to speak at Carnegie Tech." And she said, "Well, why don't you talk to the dean?" Well, I talked to Dr. So-and-so, and he wasn't interested. She said, "Stan, the dean's my husband. He's heard you on the radio. Give him a call." Okay. So I did, and we booked a date. And then it was a daytime talk, like an assembly program. And finally the question, "How much do you want?" And I figured, I got to take half a day off work here and stuff. I'll ask for $100, and it'll knock me down to 50, but I'll still get something. So he bought the 100. Then, because I knew his wife, he told me how much he was paying the other speakers in the series. $1,500, $1,700. And the talk went extremely well, and he sent a letter to the agent that he had booked the other people through. Nice letter. And they booked me at a very important talk for me, the Engineering Society of Detroit. Got $300 plus expenses. Wow. They were sold out 3 weeks in advance for 1,008 people for dinner and a talk. And there wasn't one negative question. So I did a lot more of these technical groups and stuff, and it was their enthusiastic response when the bottom fell out of the advanced nuclear and space systems business in 1970. I went full-time as a professional speaker, ufologist, whatever other name you want to put on it.
Right.
So it wasn't by intention. I didn't have a personal experience. I followed the data, and I respected the response of professional people, many of the groups.
It must have been highly influential over the years. So
that would beg the follow-up question of whether in all these years as you've gone along with this, if maybe privately after a talk, even with that much support, and I already find this hard to believe, but I'm going to ask the question anyway, if you've ever, been by yourself later and had some sort of moment of clarity where you've thought to yourself, this is ridiculous, I can't believe I'm actually talking about this kind of thing and people are buying it, or whatever the case.
No, as a matter of fact, what surprised me, I shouldn't have been, but I did. I was in high school debating, so I should have known. I enjoy being on the stage. I'm a true Leo, and I have, never had that kind of feeling. I was worried at the beginning about the noisy negativists would give me a hard time.
Sure.
But I found that audiences are fair and decent as long as you keep your cool.
Right.
And I also found out that I was good at keeping my cool, and that until at least recently. My memory was totally trustworthy. That's my Miss Gutkin experience. Fifth grade teacher told the class that the sun stood still and the planets moved around the sun. And I piped up. I was a good student, and I never sassed a teacher. But no, Miss Gutkin, the encyclopedia says the whole solar system is moving around the center of the galaxy. 12 miles a second, the number sticks with me.
Sure.
And she chewed me out. That's not the way it is. No, the sun stands still and the planets move around. Well, the next day I brought in the encyclopedia, and she grudgingly admitted that maybe that's the way it was. And so, the lesson I learned, if you're going to take on authority, have facts in hand before putting mouth in gear.
Yes, absolutely correct.
And also in debating, and we won a state championship at Linden High School in Linden, New Jersey, long time ago. But you have to know both sides of the argument if you're going to be a good debater.
Absolutely. That's absolutely correct.
It was up my alley, and I remember once on a college application in my senior year, they had a question, what did you enjoy most during your high school career? What did you do that you enjoyed the most? And for some reason, debating was canceled the final year of the political thing in school, but I said the two plays I was in my senior year. And so, the shadow was casting in my direction, so to speak.
Right, the stars began to align.
Yeah, being a performer, and I enjoy it.
Sure.
And, it's the response is so good. That's why I mentioned only 11 hecklers and 2 of them being drunk. That, I'm not a masochist. I don't do this to get a tough time. And, it's an educational experience for the people, and I respect them, and I think they appreciate it.
Sure. I have just a couple of easy questions to finish up. I did want to throw a couple of quick names at you just to get comments. I was wondering if you had any opinion of the work of one Eric von Daniken and all of the subsequent people that he seems to have inspired, because I think some people would see a real disconnect between the two subjects in some ways, because he's more into archaeology and all of this type of thing, but certainly there's a lot of parallels as well.
I've met Eric von Daniken a couple of occasions, and I found that some of his critics were being less scientific than he was.
Yes.
And so maybe you can say he jumps to conclusions, but I think that he's done a darn fine job of collecting a lot of different information for which there isn't a good explanation.
Right.
And so I don't throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Right.
I think he may be right about some of those things.
I'm a big fan of Zecharia Sitchin's work. I found those books fascinating to read, and I put him sort of in that same ballpark. I think he makes a lot of very strong points, and if you really take the time to look at the information, that it's hard to kind of counter what he has to say.
He's a real scholar.
Yes. Yes.
That doesn't mean he's right, but he's a real scholar.
Yes. Yeah, there's plenty of real scholars that are wrong about their stuff. And actually, speaking of one of those, if I could be so opinionated, how about Zahi Hawass and the way that he handles the major sites over there in Egypt. Have you met with Hawass before, or ever looked?
No, I haven't.
No,
I haven't. I'm aware of his being there.
Sure.
But,
sure.
Look, I'm working on a book now. The new book is Science Was Wrong. And Kathleen Marden, who's my co-author on Captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO Experience, and I are doing it. And it'll be out early next year, providing we get it in. We're supposed to get it in.
Right.
And there are innumerable examples of scientists being wrong. And often it's when they take on a new idea. Lord Kelvin, the great British scientist, first declared that X-rays were a hoax, Röntgen's work. He didn't know anything about them, but he knew they must be a hoax. Because you see, if there was anything to him, he would have known because he was smart. And he also he was given a free membership in the British something like Aeronautical Society. And he turned it down because he had every confidence that man would never fly in a vehicle other than a balloon.
Right, right.
And so he was wrong about those things. So there are lots of analysis done by decent people, sometimes not so decent people, that are wrong, as we subsequently find out.
Sure.
Because they haven't done their homework, or because they made crazy assumptions. Whatever the reason.
Right.
All kinds of garbage gets published and has an influence on people because it affects funding.
Yes, it does.
If the big shots in the field say something, why would I waste some money on something what the big shot says is impossible?
Right.
Silly.
Well, and that's your basic argument about SETI, is that they're getting all this great funding and they basically put up nothing in the way of solid evidence to back up what they're trying to do. I won't expand on that point because, again, I've got plenty of clips of you answering that question for other people, but it certainly fits into the same thing. So, on a much lighter note, just a couple of last things real quick. First of all, Tim here is a young man of 35 years old who has been through 4 hip surgeries in the past year and a half. Quite an ordeal that he had been through, and we both were curious just to ask you if Canadian healthcare is really better than what we've got here in the United States.
You're damn right it is. Now, I don't have my own personal experience. I'm 75, and I've never spent overnight in a hospital for me.
Well done.
My father-in-law...
Congratulations to that.
Well, there are people like... My wife is one of 9 kids, and so they're kids. They're all grandparents or great-grandparents.
Right.
But anyway, so I've had plenty of chance to observe the Canadian system. And one of the problems you're dealing with is the great willingness of the AMA to lie. I mean, they say America has the finest medical system care in the world. And you say, so how come life expectancy is shorter than for a number of other countries? How come infant mortality is worse? How come maternal mortality is worse? Why do people go bankrupt because they can't afford to pay their hospital bills, which doesn't happen in any Western country? But America has the finest care. You can get fine care in the United States. And one thing is for sure, American doctors make more than other doctors.
There is that.
My one and only question to you, sir, would be, do you have the option to select who your physician will be, or is it just kind of a general come as you go type of situation?
You mean a successor?
Correct, yes.
I haven't picked one out. No, I guess the answer is I've thought about it. I don't know what's going to happen to my papers, but look, both my parents lived to be 89, so I got plenty of years to go.
There you go. All right.
I'm an optimist.
There you go. Excellent.
Very good. And correct me if I'm wrong, you're a dual citizen, is that correct? You're a Canadian and
Yes.
a U.S. citizen? Right.
Yeah, I was born in New Jersey. It wasn't my fault. I had nothing to do with it. And I did spend 2 years in New Brunswick, New Jersey, going to Rutgers, but I've lived here in New Brunswick, Canada, where my wife is from, for 29 years.
Wow.
And first I couldn't become a dual because the United States had a law that said you'd automatically lose your American if you took anybody else's. But then somebody took the U.S. government to court and won. So the only way you can lose your U.S. citizenship is you publicly renounce it, or you commit treason, you know, fighting somebody's army against the United States, stuff like that. So I am a dual. When I go west, I'm an American. When I come home, I'm a Canadian. When I go overseas, I'm a Canadian because they don't talk about ugly Canadians.
Yeah, they don't. They don't have nearly as many nasty things to say. So, so being in Canada for all this time, as Tim and I have a TV on in the background, and we're watching Alex Ovechkin in the Washington Capitals here, we're dying to know if you're a hockey fan. There's so many teams in the area and all this kind of thing.
Many people in the family are, but growing up in New Jersey, when I did, there was no hockey down there worth talking about.
Didn't have the
Sorry.
Right. Very good. So I have to ask if you're going to be, if you plan to be in the Washington D.C. area anytime soon.
Not that I know of, but we may be promoting the new book, and I never know where I'm going to wind up. I was just in New York, and I'm going to be in Burlington, Wisconsin this coming weekend.
Yes, I have a list. Indianapolis and Tennessee also seem to be on your schedule, right?
That's right. That's right. And so I never know. We take them as they come.
Sure, of course. Well, sir, I just want to say, of course, first of all, thank you for the interview. And secondly, you're just a wonderful man that has done some really terrific work. You're obviously very influential in the field. And, you know, the idea of this show is to try to maybe carry the torch from people like yourself and Rob Swiatek, and I could just go on with the list.
Sure.
And start to get some new blood into the field and some people.
I'm all for it.
Yeah, you know, and I think that this real push in the news, it seems lately, with all these discoveries in the solar system and various other things, I think are going to start to pique people's interest. I don't agree with Stephen Bassett that Obama's going to get on TV and tell everybody that ETs are real, but...
I don't think so.
Yeah, but still, I think there's definitely a future for the field, and we really greatly appreciate your time. We're thrilled to be able to sort of, if you know what I mean by this, get you out of the way as an interview, because it's an automatic, you know.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the opportunity. Have at it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
We will.
Thank you
Thanks
very much.
very much for your time, and have a great evening.
Okay.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
I hate goodbyes.
You're listening to Time and Space on 22nd Century Radio.
That was a static-filled triple-scrambled microwave transmission between two soldiers talking in Mandarin Chinese.
Well, the Chinese were only using a simple polyphonetically grouped 20-square digit key transposed in booster photonic form with multiple nulls. Broke it with this.
A Drogan's decoder wheel? They put these things into cereal boxes for kids.
Yeah, I found it in a box of, Lucky Charms.
I suppose you think that was terribly clever.
Unbelievable. Thank you very little.
I'd say that was a pretty successful broadcast.
You have been a participant in the biggest interdimensional cross-rip since the Tunguska blast of 1909.
Felt great.
We'd like to get a sample of your brain tissue.
Okay.
Goodbye, my love.
You're not going to continue this broadcast, are you, sir?
No more monkey business! No! More monkey business!
He's gone? He's not gone! That's the whole point! He's never gone!
Is this some radical new therapy?
You see?
And don't come back until you've redeemed yourselves.
And that's how she wrote.
I wish none of this had happened.
So do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us.
Gentlemen, it's been a privilege flying with you.
Tonight, we remember those who gave their blood to defend this country. Hail the victorious dead!
Exopolitics and Ufology, Religion and Science, Time and Space. Hosted by Mike Smith.
This is Time and Space, hosted by Mike Smith.
WKPW, Kings Park West, Washington DC.